In this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about one of the most powerful and useful tools or abilities in Adobe Photoshop, and that is all about layer masking. Now, some of you may already know what layer masking is, but for those who don't, essentially what you can do is do any kind of adjustment to a separate layer. That might be adjusting the levels, that might be adjusting the saturation, that might be doing a noise reduction. It really could be anything, could even be cloning. And then when you apply a layer mask, what you can do is paint using the paintbrush in black to cover up or show through that top layer to the layer below it. So essentially, for example, in this image, what we're going to do is we're going to do a levels adjustment. We're going to brighten up the overall image. And in doing so, we're very likely to make the breast of this loon too bright. But because we'll have made that change in a second layer, we can add a layer mask and then paint in black over the breast, and that's going to show us back through to the original unaltered state. So let's take a look at what that looks. It's a very useful capability to get the hang of. So in this case, before we do our layer mask, I want to just adjust the shadows and highlights a little bit because I want us to be able to see a little more dramatically what's going on with the layer mask. So I'm gonna tone down the highlights a bit on this bird so that we can see more detail in his breast there. So you can see the before and after there. You can see a lot more detail now. Now, let's say that I wanted to make the overall image brighter here. What I could do is first make a new layer, and I could make a new layer or I could use an adjustment layer. Now I'm on the top layer here. I'm going to do an adjustment to the levels here. So let's say, for example, that I thought, well, I really want this overall image to be quite a bit brighter. But if I do that, I can see here, if I hold down the Alt key, that I'm going to make certain parts of the image too bright. So I'll go ahead and make that change. And I can see now my image is brighter. If I preview that, we can see the image is certainly quite a bit brighter and probably overall a good change, but I've made his breast too bright. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a layer mask, and we can do that down in the Layers tab here. We can simply click on Add a Layer Mask, and we'll see automatically on that layer, we see this white rectangle, and that's our layer mask. And we can see that it's selected. You can go back and forth between the layer itself and the layer mask. Now, what I'm essentially wanting to do is I want to revert back just on the breast to how it looked before, to this state, to the unaltered state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the paintbrush. I've got it on black, and that's the color that's going to show me through to the layer before. It essentially is cutting a hole in this top layer down through to the layer below. And right now I've got my opacity on 49%. That's probably actually pretty good. You probably don't want to go at 100%. So I'm going to zoom in here on the breast, and I'm just going to start painting. And what you can see is that it's darkening up the breast, but really it's not darkening it because I'm painting on with a color. It's just showing me back through to that layer below here. I can make my brush a little bit smaller and just fine tune around the edge here. There's a lot of ways in which you could do this painting here. And if I really wanted to get specific, I could get in here and paint all these little bits too. Paint over his back and everything like that. But in this case, I just want to show you what we've done. So we can see here, this is the final product. If we look at our before, we see the overall image looks a little dull. It could probably use some brightening up. So we did brighten the image up, but in this case, we added a layer mask and we painted over the breast so that it retained its original luminance. Now, if we want to see where we've painted, we can hit the / key. Sorry, the / key. And that'll show us where we've painted. And if we wanted to kind of continue to go over and paint some more in those areas, we could do that. If we felt like we had slipped up, let's say, for example, let's say when I was painting here, I made a mistake and I painted out into the surrounding area. That's no problem because layer masking is totally reversible. If I just switch to painting in white, I can cover this part here up. I might want to do that with a greater opacity, but I can cover up this part here, and then that won't be affected by the mask. So you can switch back and forth between black and white. Black's going to show you through to the layer below. White's going to cover that up, and you can really achieve some nice results with layer masking. Sky's the limit, really. You can use this for any kind of selective adjustment. In fact, when you're doing selective adjustments in Photoshop, usually what it comes down to is you have to ask yourself, am I better off making a selection using one of the selection tools, refining my edge, and then doing that adjustment? Or would I be better off making this adjustment to the overall layer, to a new layer overall, and then layer masking to achieve that selective result? In this case, it was much easier to do a layer mask, but in some other situations, it might be easier to make a selection. So for example, if I had wanted to remove the noise on this background here, I could have made a second layer, reduced the noise to the overall image, and then painted all around the bird, all of inside of the bird, to remove the noise reduced part of the image, showing the true image. But that would be a lot more work. It would be a lot easier just to use the magic wand, select the background, reduce the noise. So whenever you get to a point in your workflow where you need to do something selectively, what you want to do is think, would this be easier to layer mask, or would it be easier to make a selection? And that's going to help you make your selective edits.